Good afternoon. It's Monday, the 3rd of February, 2025, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. Joining me in the studio today, we've got Brian Gerrish. Welcome to the programme, Brian.
Thank you, Mike.
And by video link, we have Ben Rubin. Diane, sadly, is not with us today. She's a bit under the weather with a croaky voice and so on, so we will see her back next week. But we're going to begin with the Lucy Letby case, Brian.
We are, and I'll say to the audience, I have a little bit of a croaky voice as well, but we're going to do our best today. And for us, this is a really important report. There is a lot to talk about. We're going to take it in a very measured way. But firstly, I want to absolutely thank the unheard journalist, David Rose, who contacted the UK column a few days ago to ask some questions about work that UK column had done way back in 2008, and that'll unfold as we do this report. But I want to say, first of all, that over the weekend I was able to see David Rose's report, Why the Letby Case Isn't Closed. Really excellent articles, simple, straightforward, but asking some key questions. And UK column encourage all of our viewers and listeners to go and have a look at that. Now, this was just a part of it. We're encouraging you to go and read the full article, but just one paragraph here, and it's about Dr. Dewi Evans. And let's have a look at this. It says, after offering his services to the police in May 2017, the retired paediatrician claims it took him 10 minutes to work out that murder had taken place at the Countess of Chester Hospital. The rest, they say, is history. So this is picking up on something quite interesting, which is the fact that basically Dr. Dewi Evans volunteered himself to the police and took himself away from his home area specifically to go and visit those Chester police to then engage with them. So this was a comment as part of that section by David Rose, and it's very clear Dewi Evans isn't shy about his role in the conviction of Lucy Letby, and as we'll see in this report, that's absolutely true. A little bit more, it was Evans' analysis that led to a damning chart being shown at Letby's 10-month trial 3 years ago, supposedly demonstrating that she'd been present whenever a baby died or collapsed in suspicious circumstances in the unit between June 2015 and June 2016. But David Rose then says, but did the chart tell the whole story? This is the key comment. I'm not going to put the chart up, but I am going to say that if you read the article, then what emerges is that Lucy Letby was not there when 10 out of 28 incidents took place. So I'll just let the audience reflect on that. But if we also just pick up a tiny bit of the other media reports over the weekend, I've chosen the Daily Mail here, but once it was out, the unheard story started to really spread. So here's the Daily Mail. Questions about Dr. Evans, a retired consultant paediatrician, were raised during Letby's trial. In an unusual move, appeal judge Lord Justice Jackson wrote to the trial judge, Mr. Justice Goss, telling how a report Dr. Evans drew up in an unrelated case had been dismissed as, quote, worthless. I thought that was a pretty outstanding comment, Mike, and one which I think everybody should pick up on, because this wasn't a member of the public making some random comment. This was coming from another senior judge. And the report being mentioned here also claimed that Evans had breached his duty as an expert by deciding the outcome he wanted and then working out an explanation to achieve it. And I'm going to say to the audience, please remember this, because when I read this sentence, it took my mind back to work we were doing in 2008. But before we get on to that, let's just have a little look at how the BBC dealt with Dr. Dewi Evans and what he had to say.
Much of the criticism of the scientific evidence used to convict Lucy Letby has focused on one man. The prosecution's main expert witness. He reviewed all the medical evidence for the babies in the case.
I went through them all and I thought, oh my word, there is something highly suspicious here. These babies should not have died.
I mean, there are people out there loudly saying this is a miscarriage of justice.
That's entirely up to them. The evidence that led to Lucy Letby being found guilty was very compelling, very consistent. Babies who were stable and in her sole care collapsed and died. And they shouldn't have collapsed, let alone died. What we had on a number of occasions was a stable baby who suddenly became unstable, crashed, failed to respond to resuscitation and died. And where there was compelling evidence of air embolus backed up by x-rays, skin changes.
What would you say directly to sceptics who are arguing that air embolism is an unproven hypothesis?
Well, I disagree with them. I disagree with them. Babies don't suddenly drop dead.
The man whose evidence helped put Letby away has no such doubts.
What is it about certain people that they are taking the side of a murderer? I think the evidence is overwhelming. I've no doubt at all that she was responsible for the deaths of these babies.
So no messing around by Dr. Dewi Evans. He's absolutely certain, and of course it's been his expert evidence that was really a major factor in the case, and appears to be going to be a major factor in the ongoing inquiry. So let's just first of all make a statement for the UK column. We think this is important because we want to recognise the families who've suffered losses. In this exclusive news report on the Lucy Letby case, UK column fully acknowledges the trauma, suffering and loss experienced by those parents who experienced the death of a loved baby at the Countess of Chester Hospital. We understand that nothing can replace their lost children or really ease their mourning for that loss. And what we now need to say is it's about justice. So whether we consider that Lucy Letby is guilty or innocent, UK column believes that we must remember that each and every one of us deserves a fair trial where no stone has been left unturned in proving our innocence or guilt. Failures in justice represent not only a threat to the life and future of Lucy Letby, but to the lives and freedoms of each and every one of us. And that also, of course, includes our children. But here we really want to recognise the emotions and the passions that are out there around this case. We recognise all that, but we feel that we must comment on areas that we think require further investigation and consideration. And this is where things get interesting, because it was that telephone call by David Rose that prompted the UK column to go back looking at work that we did in 2008 when we were looking at a child snatching case in South Wales, which involved Dr. Dewi Evans. And this is one of the articles that we wrote at the time. It's part of the article on screen, June 2008, Neath, Port Talbot, Social Services, kidnap Bonnie Lewis. And the start of this article was poignant at the time, is very poignant still, because it revolves around this letter, which was a little handwritten letter from Bonnie herself. It was written to her mum, her mam, her nan, grandma and her granddad. It's from June 1998. And let's just bring up the text so that we can read it for you. It says, "Dear Mam, Nan and Granddad, please help me. I am still in a lot of pain and I want to come home. I love you all so very much. No one is listening to me. I told the Guardian that I was still in pain and I wanted to talk to the judge and to go home. She told me no. She said, who's going to believe you now? Why are the social workers so nasty? And the Guardian social workers, that's the Guardian at Little social workers, told me I am not allowed to tell my mother I am in pain. not allowed to tell you that I love you, not to say that I want to come home, not to talk to my friends in school about my pain, not to say I love my nan and granddad, and my pain, if I say it to my mum, they will stop contact, never see you again. Julie Resnicek and The Guardian have told me I'm never coming home. I love you loads, and nan and granddad, I love you loads. That was the emotional letter written by a little girl that had been taken away from her parents.
And sorry, Brian, just to clarify, when we're not talking about the Guardian newspaper here, this is Guardian ad litem, which is a legal...
Her guardian social worker.
So this is somebody assigned by the state to be her guardian?
Indeed, yeah.
The background to this case was that she had been complaining about extreme stomach pains for a very long time.
This is absolutely right, and let's emphasise that by bringing a picture. This was in our first article. This is a small selection of the huge cocktail of drugs prescribed for Bonnie, some of which were not even approved for use on children. And as Mike has just said, the key issue was that Bonnie had a lot of pain. We're going to come on to the details of this, but I wanted first of all to let the wider audience here in UK and hopefully worldwide understand the plight of a little girl in pain, taken away from her loving mother by social services. And this was an incident which also involved Dr. Dewi Evans. So in the article, we listed some of the NHS authorities involved in this very sad affair: Singleton Hospital in Swansea, Neathport Talbot County Borough Council Social Services, Children's Legal Services, Princess of Wales Hospital Bridgend, Neath General Hospital, University Hospital Cardiff, Alder Hey Hospital Liverpool, apologies for that original spelling error there, Royal Free Hospital London, the Home Office, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, MPs and local councillors. This was a web of clinical and child protection failures in the Bonnie Lewis case, and central to that case was Dr. Dewi Evans. So let's just have a look at a little bit of a talk that I gave after that first edition, or that first article of the UK column came out. This was a talk in Port Talbot, South Wales. It was a private audience assembled by the mother and the Linda Lewis family. And I presented the facts of the case because Mum was too distraught to do it herself. We're just going to look at a few seconds just to give you a feel of what I had to say back then in August 2008. I'm going to explain a little bit about myself, and then we're going to talk about Bonnie and what's happened to her, and we'll try and and we're basing it on evidence, and we're going to show you documents. This is a list of the medical situation. We had a young girl, Bonnie, who became ill. And she became so ill that Mum had to take her to the GPs, and later it took Bonnie into hospital. And it took her into a series of hospitals where a series of doctors failed to actually diagnose what was the matter with her. She was in pain, she was in constant pain, and yet they couldn't get a diagnosis and they couldn't get a treatment. And these are some of the things that were done to this little girl. Her illness wasn't diagnosed. They took a healthy appendix out and left a huge abscess, which nearly killed her. They gave her a huge cocktail of drugs. Some of the drugs given were of such quantity that if Linda had actually given her daughter those drugs, she would have killed her, or close to it. And an overdose of oral morphine was one of the prescriptions made for this little girl. They were given the runaround to doctor, to other doctor, to another doctor, to another hospital, back to the same doctor. Unbelievable incompetence. Or maybe it was orchestrated. There were lies. There were lies in what was said about her diagnosis. There were lies about the subsequent treatment. There were lies about what Linda, her mum, had actually said. And the worst thing for me when I came and looked at the documents was the fact that eventually in this horrible saga, where this little girl had endured so much, she had professional adults, doctors and social workers telling her that she wasn't in pain. It was imaginary. Now, we are very sure we know what was the matter with her, and we also know from the medical books that that condition gave rise to a huge amount of pain, a throbbing pain that goes from your chest all the way through to your back. But this girl was told it was in her mind. And these are very cruel people. So that was just part of a presentation in the evening with a select group of people, including the family, where we presented the evidence. People also spoke out on behalf of Linda and her daughter, and we also had questions. But a powerful evening, very, very sad, very tragic. And it's an evening which I will never forget. After that event, the UK column produced another article, and that article has never been seen before. We're going to show it to you today. It's on screen, October 2008, Bonnie Lewis kidnapped by the state. And it's part 2 of our investigation into what we described as this scandalous abuse of a young girl by the Neath Port Talbot State Child Protection Machinery. And we'll take a couple of excerpts out of this. We listed charges that we had made against basically the NHS, but also Neath Port Talbot Social Services, failure to diagnose, the removal of the healthy appendix, a cover-up of the severe post-operative abscess, excessive prescription of drugs, the oral morphine, incorrect discharge and prescription forms, confused and incompetent hospital referrals, examination and treatment, false denial of Bonnie's pain by doctors and social workers in favour of psychological accusations against the parents and child. So if we go on to page 2 and we just bring up a little bit more, there's more than just the incompetence and negligence. Bonnie was first admitted to Singleton Hospital on the 23rd of November 1996 via casualty with a pulse of 140 and a temperature over 100. 5 days later, she was discharged by Dr. Dewi Evans, who considered nothing wrong. On the 9th of December 1996, and still in pain, Bonnie was readmitted to Neath General Hospital. In his letter to Dr. Roberts, Bonnie's GP, dated the 9th of July 1997, Evans again ignores the medical shambles and talks about investigations. He gives no definitive diagnosis, but does put himself forward as the primary point of contact within local paediatrics. And Mike, when I've seen this again now, the similarities for me on a personal level with what's taken place around the Lucy Letby case are overwhelming. We say in this article later, this central role effectively allows him to steer the subsequent direction of Bonnie's case, labelling the mother with false psychiatric diagnosis and covering up medical misdiagnosis and incompetence. And we'll add a bit at the end of his letter. Dr. Evans stresses that he considered that the conference's decision should channel all medical referrals through the two of us. And that decision was absolutely correct. So he's happy here because he's forced an important panel looking at the case that all of the medical information is going to be channeled between two doctors, and he is one of those. And then he ends the letter by suggesting Bonnie now needs her own representative in the form of a guardian ad litem. So this is a very, very serious case, and the man at the heart of it was Dr. Dewi Evans. We also printed evidence in the form of letters, and we commented on some of these. So the third page was a tiny fraction of the evidence. If we just have a look about the flow of the story, here we're actually mentioning the business of Dr. Roberts and Dr. Dewey Evans from Singleton Hospital. Evans is saying that nothing was wrong with Bonnie, but the mother has problems. This is alluding to Munchausen by proxy, which was being bandied around by many medical people at the time. And this one here into 1998, the 18th of February, was the date at which the social services actually took Bonnie herself. Now, if we look at some of the material here, we've taken extracts, but this is Dr. Dewey Evans on the 25th of July, 1997. He said that the conference was of the view that the threshold of significant harm, brackets emotional abuse, has been crossed. So here we've got a young girl in serious pain, but Dewey Evans is focusing on the mother and suggesting that she has got problems. He says, however, agencies are prepared to give the family the opportunity to work in partnership. The conference is making this statement, not Dr. Dewey Evans, but you see where this is leading. And then here we've got in paragraph 2, the conference recommended that the supervision of any medical support intervention is undertaken entirely under the auspices of the family GP, Dr. Roberts, and consultant paediatrician, Dr. Evans. Any referrals to other specialists, e.g. psychiatrists, should occur only after positive consultation between Dr. Roberts and Dr. Evans. So my thoughts here, Mike, are that he is absolutely controlling the case by taking control of this central part of how matters are discussed. And if we move on to other documents here, this is again dialogue between Dewey Evans and Dr. Roberts. Pleased to meet up with you. I thought I should summarise the factors that I consider significant, which makes me certain, firstly, there is significant psychological problems here, and secondly, the family dynamics are contributing to this girl's illness. So no diagnosis, but his view is that the family are to blame. And then he criticises the family because they took action to try and get a diagnosis for Bonnie. They took her in a van to Alderhay Children's Hospital in the middle of the night instead of arranging admission to a local hospital. This is both reckless and irresponsible. But here he is commenting on the actions of a mother who by now was desperate that neither GPs or hospitals could actually deal with the girl's illness and produce a diagnosis. And at the end of this paragraph, Dr. Dewey Evans is now saying, I can only describe this as attention seeking by proxy. And this is an attempt to label Linda Lewis, the mother, as having Munchausen by proxy, that this was a psychological issue of the mother, not a physical issue of the girl. I find this, Mike, particularly seeing it again after all these times and in light of the Lucy Letby case, I find this appalling. So we'll continue through. The well-being of Bonnie in the Royal Free Hospital. Children normally relax when their mother is around and various physical symptoms become less. For them to get worse when she was around and improve when she was not there is very telling and a consistent feature suggesting a psychosomatic problem. But of course, this is comment by individuals. This isn't a diagnosis by a psychiatrist on the mother. This is comment within the NHS and the medical sphere. And this goes on. We've got another document here between Dr. Dewey Evans and here he says he's writing regarding the latest developments of Bonnie. She's missed 2 appointments. She's not at school, but is having some informal home tuition. Social services were trying to get Bonnie to school even though she was in pain. And what is being said again, I feel that there are now very strong grounds for suggesting that Bonnie's health is being avoidably impaired by a family. If she's unwell, she should be seeing the appropriate medical specialist. The option has been refused, but it's still open. That option was refused by the family because by this stage they had no trust in Dr. Dewi Evans or the medical system. And it goes on here with, again, a key attempt, in my personal opinion, by Dr. Dewi Evans to take control of this case and the family and the girl by he's suggesting exploring the possibility of appointing a guardian ad litem to represent Bonnie, and he says he'd welcome your advice regarding the appropriate procedures. So here he is at the centre of the case with a girl in extreme pain, no diagnosis, and he is controlling what is happening. So if we come into the key facts, just to end really with a summary, Bonnie suffered severe pain consistently undiagnosed by Dr. Dewi Evans and others. He was essentially, in my opinion, failing in his clinical care, and he deliberately labels the mother as Munchausen by proxy. This is the term being used at that time in the medical profession, a diagnosis which he wasn't fully qualified to make. Bonnie's mother, however, was continually striving and failing to get a diagnosis for Bonnie's pain. Dr. Dewi Evans takes control of the child protection team, effectively blocking the mother from independent medical advice. And if we carry on through, Bonnie's mother and grandfather eventually take Bonnie to Florida, where they do achieve a diagnosis, and that is Zollinger's disease, and this is multiple ulceration of the gut, intensely painful. But what happens is that Neath Port Talbot Social Services arrive with US police. They snatch Bonnie in Florida from her mother and the grandfather. The mother has now become the risk, and that girl is then brought back to the UK.
On a false passport, if I remember rightly.
On a false passport, Mike, because the application carried out by the local authority was flawed and deceptive, so that even the Home Office issuing the passport was not fully aware what was going on. But this is something which is so cruel. Bonnie was taken from her mother, extremely distraught, still in pain. She was flown back to the UK, placed in a psychiatric facility, and told the pain was imaginary. And then Neath Port Talbot Social Services permanently removed Bonnie from her mother in family court proceedings. So what is the ultimate irony? Well, the mother achieves the diagnosis in America, but once the social services have that diagnosis for Zollinger's disease, they treat the girl using the diagnosis obtained by the mother, and the mother is then falsely branded as having psychiatric problems. Bonnie's taken away, and Linda Lewis never sees her daughter again. And Dr. Dewi Evans, central to all the key decisions of the team around Bonnie Lewis. Now, our article was never published because we were gagged by Neath Port Talbot at the time for the material that we wanted to publish. So I'm going to say that as soon as we started to report the real facts of the Bonnie Lewis case and Dr. Dewi Evans' failings, Neath Port Talbot local authority threatened the UK column with legal action. So that is the end of our special report today, but I'm going to say that key for us is the fact that when we go back to 2008 and look at that dreadful case and the sheer cruelty as to how Bonnie's case was handled, the man who was making key decisions or failing to make the right decisions was the man to be used 17 years later as an expert witness in a highly sensitive case around Lucy Letby. Ben, I can see you. I can see the expression on your face as I've been delivering this. Can I just ask for some brief comment for the audience, please?
Yes, thank you, Brian. Hello, everybody. I just find this incredibly distressing, really, and it's so depressingly predictable in a way. The amount of times now that we hear of the people, the institutions who are supposed to be caring for us, safeguarding us, our children, our society, being the ones who are actually inflicting abuse, it just boggles the mind. It really does.
Yes, Ben, let's leave that then for now. I'm quite certain we're going to be coming back to this in the future. But let's move on to, well, secretive networks.
Absolutely, and in a way, we're not really moving on because it's the same issue ultimately. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the issues that were raised in the interview that I carried out a couple of weeks ago with Raja Miah, MBE, and it was broadcast last Thursday on UK Column. If you have a chance to go and watch it, I'd highly recommend that you do. It's a really striking interview. We get into some extraordinarily important issues relating to one of the defining issues, I think, of the current moment in the UK, this issue of Asian grooming gangs, Pakistani and Bangladeshi grooming gangs, what Raja Miah describes as cartels, essentially, who are trading in children, white working class children, across the north of the UK, particularly in Lancashire, the west of the Pennines, where Raja Miah is based over in Oldham. And the fact that this is taking place under the full watchful eye and with full knowledge of senior politicians, the police, social services, all of the people who are supposed to be looking out for us ultimately. And this runs right the way up to the top level of the UK political system, as we're going to get into in a moment. And it also connects directly into two secretive networks, not so secretive in that we know about them. We know they exist, they issue public statements, but we don't know what actually goes on behind the scenes and how these networks are run and to what purpose ultimately. And they'll be well known to UK Column viewers. The first one I'm going to talk about is common purpose. And this is something that has been a focus of UK Column for many, many years. And I'm going to direct your attention and provide links to two articles. This first one, the Rotherham Common Purpose Effect, and also the Nottingham Common Purpose Effect, which highlight issues of systemic abuse in Rotherham and Nottingham, where children are subject to abuse by gangs and or people in the social system, and all of that happening under the watchful eye of members of the Common Purpose Network, right? So people who have been trained and reframed by Common Purpose to become part of what they view as a new generation, a new class of managerial elite who are going to be running the country, but appear to be perfectly happy to allow this kind of abuse to take place. Let me just define for you quickly what the common purpose effect is. So this comes from this Nottingham article. It says here, we've long stated that by blurring the boundaries between people, professions, public and private sectors, responsibility and accountability, common purpose encourages graduates to believe that as new selected leaders, they can work together outside of the established political and social structures to achieve a paradigm shift or change. Now, that's a familiar word, isn't it? They call this doctrine leading beyond authority. In doing so, the allegiance of the individual becomes reframed on common purpose colleagues and their network. I'm just wondering, Brian, if you might want to step in and give a little bit of insight into common purpose. This is an issue that you've personally been very focused on over the past 15 or 20 years now.
Well, I'll respond by saying that definition that you've given there still stands, and something that's very important to say, and we've said it from the earliest reports about common purpose. Of course, most people involved with the organisation have little idea as to what it's really doing. So we've stressed several times that when people have been involved in common purpose, some of them have come to us to tell their stories, but we regard people as not understanding fully what this pernicious charity is up to, and it takes looking at the broader picture to understand what they're up to. But it's certainly change. It's changing established society, not to what we voted for. No, it's for what Common Purpose thinks a new society should look like.
Right. And they don't seem particularly concerned about the methods that they use to implement this new society. They obviously present this as a great altruistic act. So you've got this quote here from Robert Kerr, who's chair or was formerly chair of the Common Purpose Charitable Trust, saying there is no doubt that people who constitute Common Purpose, the alumni, the networks ultimately, can fulfill the purpose of providing leadership in our communities, whether modest or at a high level. When we do, the world will become a better place, apparently, according to Robert Kerr. Maybe they should let some of the victims of these child abuse networks understand what's better about allowing that kind of activity to take place, which is what we've seen Common Purpose doing. Now, let's link this back to the conversation with Roger Meir and what's happened over the past few years in the north of England, specifically in Oldham. Well, actually, it turns out, and thank you to Martin Edwards, the author of those two articles, and UK Columns Stalwart for drawing my attention to this announcement on the Common Purpose website. The University of Manchester partnership sparks hope for tomorrow's leaders. Our generation will be pivotal in shaping a greener future. So this is the change agenda, the greener future, the greener change agenda. This came from 2023. This was an event, as it says there, that took place in Manchester. They're looking at how Greater Manchester can be cleaner and greener, where they brought together a group of 18 to 25-year-olds. So they really recruit people into these networks from a very young age, from different cultures and backgrounds, in order to make change happen in their communities, right? So this is exactly as just been described there. Young people, in this instance, being brought together in order to form part of a new network where they can drive change across their communities as part of an external entity, essentially. And Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, closed the programme on the day. So Andy Burnham, who's been leading the very poor review, the assurance review into the grooming gang issue in Greater Manchester, and is currently still today the Mayor of Greater Manchester, is directly linked into Common Purpose by that event. Right? And I don't think that we should be surprised by this, to be honest with you, given what we know now has been happening in the Northwest and what we've seen historically has been taking place in places like Rotherham and Nottingham over the past 20 or 30 years. Right? So that's the first network, Common Purpose. They appear to be in the mix here. And I think we need to continue to scrutinise them. They're extraordinarily important and powerful. And equally as important, potentially more powerful even, or I'm sure that these things overlap quite closely, we also have the second network I'm going to talk about, which is the Fabian Society. And the Fabians were established in 1884. They are the future of the left in the UK and internationally. This is an agenda to implement a global socialist state, a communist state. That's what they're working to do. Their AGM was held in Manchester in 2018. Andy Burnham was the keynote speaker. He was the guest of honour at the Fabian Society event. He's also very heavily referenced on their website. So if you go to the Fabian Society website and search for Andy Burnham, you get 16 pages of references to him. I actually don't know if he is a member, but he's certainly very active in their community and is being held up by them as a leader that they certainly stand beside, that they're happy to have there representing them and doing so alongside, in this instance, Kate Green. Can get that back on screen quickly, who is someone that Roger and I spoke about last week at some length. Because she is currently today the Deputy Mayor of Greater Manchester for Policing and Crime. So she's overseeing the supposed reviews into the grooming gangs issue, whether in Oldham or further afield. Supposedly working for Andy Burnham, but I get the sense that she might be pulling his strings behind the scenes because, as I said, she's now today doing that job in Greater Manchester. Before that, she was the chair of the Fabian Society, which is something that Roger and I touched on in that interview last week. So from 2017 to 19, they have these 2-year terms that they do. Kate Green was the chair of the Fabian Society, also on the executive committee. There are about 10 members of the exec committee. I've just pulled out 2 that I thought were of interest. Sarah Sackman, Labour MP, currently Minister for Courts and Legal Services, and actually from last year, from July onwards, she was the Solicitor General. So one of the top lawyers in the country. She's a Fabian, and also importantly, Jim McMahon, who we spoke about last week, who was the leader of Oldham Council between 2011 and 2016, when much of the abuse that was described by Roger Meir was taking place. Yeah, so he essentially oversaw the cover-up of that abuse based on what was described to us in Roger's testimony last week. And he's then subsequently been elevated to the exec committee of the Fabian Society, as we can see here, and he's now a serving Minister of State. Yes, he's one of the top people in the government. He's the Minister of State for Housing, Communities, Local Government and English Devolution, importantly. So this is the guy who is rolling out the complete transformation of local government, implementation of the Metro Mayor system, which is a template for global governance. They're presenting it as devolution, but that's actually not what it is at all. It's just a distributed, centralised system where they're going to implement a completely new order, ultimately. And this man, Jim McMahon, who was intimately involved in the cover-up of systemic abuse, is the man responsible for implementing that new system of governance. Just think about that. Like, how is that happening? How can that possibly be acceptable to us as a nation, to allow people with this track record to be given that amount of power, right? And it is an extraordinary amount of power, because we can see the influence that he's already having on the UK. So we're in a situation now where we've got council elections being cancelled, right? So we also have elections coming up in May this year. They're being cancelled. Obviously, this is just being positioned as a delay. So the BBC saying that these are going to be rescheduled. Yeah, but it's all part of a major redesign of local government, which was announced in December, that Jim McMahon is responsible for rolling out. They are being cancelled, but obviously the fact checkers are in there to reinforce the official narrative. Are this year's local elections being cancelled? Well, it isn't quite right, according to Full Fact. Some councils with elections scheduled for May 25 have asked to postpone them. So it's just a postponement. You really shouldn't worry about it. Then obviously we should be aware that Full Fact on its board as a director has this guy, James Harding, who is, we can see there, an active director of Full Fact, and also in the bottom right-hand corner, you can see founder and editor-in-chief of Tortoise Media Limited. And we believe that Tortoise Media, the name, is a reference to the mascot of the Fabian Society. So you can see the level of control and the level at which this network is operating. They're right across the cabinet, they're right across the top levels of the media, and the Fabian Society is a tortoise. It relates to Quintus Fabius Maximus, who was a Roman senator whose strategy, his approach to fighting the war with Hannibal was about avoiding direct confrontation. So he would attack the supply lines. He'd go after your ability to feed yourself and to support yourself. He'd avoid direct conflict. And actually, I think that you can directly correlate that approach to a lot of what we're seeing happen in central government at the moment. If you look at what's happening in the energy system, the attacks on farmers, the importation of thousands of illegal immigrants on an annual basis, I think that absolutely fits into this sort of strategic approach that the Fabian Society are very happy to represent. Their other sigil, by the way, we talked about the tortoise, their other sigil is this. They are wolves in sheep's clothing. It's very telling that they are communicating to you who they are. And there are loads of them, 141 MPs all across the UK, extraordinarily well represented at the top level in the cabinet, with Angela Rayner, Rachel Reeves, Yvette Cooper, Wes Streeting, Ed Miliband over there, currently in the process of destroying the energy system. And of course, Starmer is a Fabian, as well as, let's not forget, this man, Arch Fabian Tony Blair, who is probably pulling the strings behind the scenes.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you for that. Lots to think about there. We'll be discussing quite a bit of that in Extra as well. Now, if you like what the UK column does, you would like to support us, support.UK column is the place to go for that. There are options to help us out. You can make a donation or join as a member. You can pick something up at the UK column shop or from clivedecard.com. We get a small percentage of every purchase there. If you can't do any of that, please do share our material, share links on the various articles, blogs, and videos, and so on. Now, a bit of news for you, and the next UK column on location event is going to be on Saturday, April the 5th, 2025. It's going to be in Cheltenham, so it's going to be central England, and we would like to invite anybody that was at Bristol. Please come along again. If you didn't make it to Bristol, come along to this one as well. The tickets will be on sale very, very soon, but just keep this date in your diary. In the meantime, we'll be announcing speakers very shortly.
Yeah, excellent. Now, what else have we got to report? Well, Scottish People's COVID-19 inquiry, sponsored by Common Knowledge Edinburgh to raise awareness. That's Saturday, the 22nd of February 2025, 9:30 to 4:30, Main Hall, Lauriston Hall in Edinburgh. So if you can get along to that, supporting these events is important. Public Child Protection Wales, the people standing up against the grooming of young children through the education system, have got their annual conference on the 22nd of February 2025. They've got a lot of really good speakers. And we're going to say that this team with Kimberly Isherwood and the other ladies have done such huge work. If you are in the vicinity and can get along for that, please do. And the venue's near Newport in South Wales, so communications there should be pretty good. Excuse me, what else have we got? Well, we've got an interview going out tomorrow at 1 o'clock. This is Sandy Adams and Debbie Evans talking to Vet Roger Meacock. They've already been talking about the inheritance tax for farmers, which is, of course, a worry, but in part two, they'll be having a look at where we're going in 2025 and are we heading towards a famine. So that's a pretty important subject.
It is indeed. Okay, let's move on then to Keir Starmer and what he's been up to. So at the end of last week, Keir Starmer hosted Olaf Scholz, the outgoing German Chancellor, at Chequers. That's for anybody that's outside the UK, the Prime Minister's countryside retreat. We have just a little bit of video as they went skipping hand in hand through the grounds. Let's have a listen to this.
Olaf, my friend, you're very, very welcome here at Chequers. I think we've made real progress. The Trinity House Agreement has been signed, and of course we've reached agreement on migration. So thank you for that leadership.
So we don't know whether that's any more than a goodbye before Scholz leaves office in the upcoming elections in Germany. But it does follow on from the most recent UK-German Defence Pact, as he was talking about there, the Trinity House Pact that was signed last October. And this took place when the Defence Secretary John Healey and German Defence Minister Boris Pistorius signed this, what they described as a landmark Trinity House Agreement. It was billed as, quotes, bringing the two nations closer together than ever before. They claimed the agreement would boost the economy, investment and jobs, and pave the way for a new artillery gun barrel factory to open in the UK. I'm not aware that that's happened, strangely enough. German aircraft operating from Scotland and so on. So let's just have a look at a little bit of the detail of what they were talking about at the time. And this is this agreement that they were talking about this weekend. New long-range strike weapons, new boosts for British industry, new cooperation to strengthen the eastern flank, land industrial cooperation, as they described it, protecting critical underwater infrastructure, German aircraft based in Scotland, new drones, new maritime uncrewed air system capabilities, new Ukraine support, joint work with partners to integrate air defence systems. So the core of the of EU defence then is Britain, France and Germany working together. So between Britain and France, we've got the 2010 Lancaster House Treaty. We have the 2018 Sandhurst Treaties. Between Britain and Germany, we've got the 2018 Joint Vision Statement and the 2024 Trinity House Agreement that we've just been talking about. And between France and Germany, we've got the 2019 Aachen Treaty. So, you know, in the meantime, that's what the core looks, but it should come as no surprise that Starmer seems sees defence as being at the heart of a reset, as he's describing it, between UK and EU relations. And with that in mind, he'll again be skipping off to Brussels today and this evening, in fact, to join the informal leaders meeting, which is happening. And so the question is, why? This is because Europe must, as they said, double down on its efforts to crush Putin's war machine as Russia's economy shows signs of weakening. The press release says that he will urge EU leaders to step up and shoulder more of the burden in order to keep Europe safe against Russia's increasing campaign of sabotage and destruction on the continent. And they say it's necessary on top of the sanctions that they've already put in place to, as they like to describe it, increase Putin's difficulties. He will, of course, this is Starmer, is going to be arguing for sustained military support to Ukraine, because that, he says, is going to put Ukraine in the strongest possible position this year. But Starmer is also going to be continuing this notion that defence and security are at the heart of his plan for change. And this is ensuring that the UK armed forces, he says, will have the cutting edge equipment they need. I mean, this has got to be the biggest joke. The UK armed forces are so short of equipment that even their primary public relations tool, the Red Arrows, is going to be gone by the end of this decade because of a shortage of aircraft. You know, this is the stage that we are at. So tomorrow this afternoon, actually, he was going to be meeting with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, who's also in Brussels. But the key outcome of this special appearance in Brussels is he's going to set out his stall for what he's described as an ambitious EU-UK defence and security partnership. And this is something, as we've mentioned many times before, but I just want to bring it on screen once again. If you're not aware of this drive for EU military defence union, military unification, this is an absolutely key part of the European Union structure, and something that the UK wants to be involved in, no matter how much rhetoric they might put behind the idea of NATO still being the key driver or the key sort of mechanism for defence cooperation. But the biggest question then that we have is, where's Nigel? Because, okay, Nigel is talking about, as Ben was talking about, the fact that the local elections are being withdrawn and so on at the moment, and he is therefore going to be launching this massive election rally and so on for reform. But he is strangely silent on what Keir Starmer is doing with the EU at the moment, and I find that absolutely fascinating. Ben, I don't know if you've got any thoughts on why he's silent, but this is not a topic, this idea of defence and security partnership with the EU, this is not a topic that he has ever really taken seriously. But even this whole idea of a reset between the UK and the EU is something that he seems to be just missing in the discussion about.
Yeah, fascinating, isn't it? Could Farage be being dishonest about his actual intentions here? I don't know. Like, it's difficult to tell. I think it is striking that he's completely missing on that front. And for my money, he looks like he works for himself basically, and probably his mates in the city. I think that's fair to say.
Well, and then speaking about the city, let's just talk a little bit about the City of London.
That was a nice segue, wasn't it? So yes, we're going to look at what's the city doing? What's the city up to? And are they dictating British economic policy at the moment? I think they might be. I'm going to introduce you to a few characters, and I'll let you make your own minds up about what I've just said. So this relates to the World Economic Forum, and I've been speaking about this for the past few weeks. Obviously, happened in Davos at the end of January. And they're improving the state of the world by delivering ever more money and power into the hands of a global 1%. It's basically what they're doing. And last week I talked about them using a fascist system. And actually I think that it's more accurately described as a woke fascist system. I talked about this last year, this idea that actually, it's not the 1930s anymore. Mussolini isn't still around. They've got to evolve their ideas to adapt with the times. And actually, what we're looking at now is this sort of multi-headed beast of intersectional Marxism combined with the integration of the market and the state, what I call an unholy alliance between money and power that I personally believe to be Fabianism. I think that's what Fabianism is. We talked about the Fabians earlier, and I'm going to bring them back into frame a little bit later on in this section as well. Before I do that, let's just talk about money and power, power and money, and they are best exemplified at Davos in this image, again, that I showed last week. So representing power, we have Rachel Reeves, the UK Chancellor, and Jonathan Reynolds, the Business Secretary, who are both Fabians, by the way, so they're part of that network I talked about earlier on in the show. And representing money, we have Jonathan Holt there, UK Managing Partner at KPMG, who loves doing these sort of funny hand sign things, one of these guys, yeah. That's a bit weird, Jonathan. Why are you doing that? Anyway, and also representing money, because this was a jointly hosted event between KPMG and the City of London, right? So the City of London Corporation ran this with KPMG. Rachel Reeves, Jonathan Reynolds were both there. Money and power, the unholy alliance on stage there in front of you. And here we see Chris Hayward representing the City of London Corporation. He's the policy chief, very powerful guy, meeting global business and political leaders to champion the UK as a world-class destination for investment, but actually ultimately to champion the City of London as a world-class destination for investment. That's what he's there to do. They've got this whole program running in a minute about the global city. Right, and we could do a whole hour-long section on that. I haven't got time to dig into it right now, but go to the globalcity.uk and you'll see what the City of London are up to. You can see this here from Chris Hayward saying that they want to make the UK the best place in the world to raise private capital to fund the global transition in infrastructure markets and technology to support a net zero future. Right, so again, talked about this last week, net zero, climate change, that whole thing. This is a racket. This is a marketplace. This is designed to make huge amounts of money for private investors and people like Chris Hayward, frankly, at the City of London, right? And a lot of this, they also love to talk about impact investing. And this is basically gets spun as being socially responsible. But actually, I think that when you understand that these people think that the human population needs to be reduced by about 90 to 95%, that is really what you need to understand when they're talking about social and environmental benefits and impact. That's the kind of thing that they're talking about, right? And again, it's been driven by people like this. There's Chris Hayward talking to Tony Blair, and he was making big statements. This guy's very, very active, and we're just going to listen now to a quick video statement he made about the future of the UK economy at Davos last week.
I'm back in Davos, Switzerland once again for the World Economic Forum, together with our Lord Mayor. We will be promoting the City of London as the global financial capital of the world. And together we will meet investors and potential investors from around the world who will realise that Britain is open for business.
The City of London is the financial capital of the world. Rachel Reeves was there, Jonathan Reynolds was there with him presenting that message. That's who these people work for, I believe, ultimately. You know, when they talk about growth, when they talk about economic transformation, it's all designed to deliver for the city and private investors. He just said that the country is open for business. Britain is open for business. And just a few days after he made that statement, what do we see in London? We see Keir Starmer in the city repeating that message, with Rachel Reeves saying Britain is back and open for business. Let me just bring that up slightly bigger. There's the message. You can see it. Yeah, so City says this at Davos, Starmer says it in London. Right? There's a total parallel there between the two messages. And let's have a little look at his piggy little face. Look at him; he's loving it. These are his people. He loves this kind of setup, Starmer, and he loves going to big city events. Actually, you can see we'll put them in the room together. There's Chris Hayward and Starmer talking to each other, brothers in arms, money and power. There, the unholy alliance between the two at the Lord Mayor's banquet back in December last year. Hashtag growth unleashed. Yeah, again, growth equals bottom line growth for the City of London. That is who Starmer's working for. And none of this is new. It's been going on for thousands of years. Here is the remembrancer. So this is Paul Double, this guy is called. He was made the Remembrancer, which is basically the original corporate lobbyist. They literally sit behind the Speaker's chair in Parliament to represent the interests of the city. And actually, Mike was talking about checkers being the official residence of the UK Prime Minister. Well, look, there's a checkerboard behind him. That's Masonic symbolism. It goes right the way up to the name of the official residence of the UK Prime Minister. We're going to talk about this guy in extra, I've got a feeling, right? Because this is just astonishing, really, when you understand how embedded the City of London and the banks and the financial system are into the mechanics of governance in this country. It's absolutely astonishing, and this goes right the way back to the Fabian Society, as I've been talking about earlier on, both in this segment and the earlier segment that I did, because Chris Hayward, this is just last week, he's there talking to the Fabian Society New Year's meeting, saying the road to Britain's future, one of economic growth and shared prosperity, runs through the City of London. This was a message shared at the New Year conference at the Guildhall, right? And he's talking about the importance of stakeholders like the Fabian Society in order to unlock UK growth. That's the Guildhall. This is basically the key administrative building of the City of London. That's where the Fabian Society held their New Year's conference. Money and power, power and money, total integration. Interestingly, and I haven't got a huge amount of time, overseeing the Guildhall, we have these two characters. So this is Gog and Magog, who in the book of Revelation are named as evil forces that will fight with Satan in the great battle in the end times against God. That's who's running the country at the moment. And before we finish, let me just close by introducing you to this fella. So there's Chris Hayward meeting another dignitary at the mayor's dinner back in December. But I'm going to talk about this guy sneaking into frame in the corner there, who is Ian Thomas, CBE, who's the chief executive, you can see at the top there, of the City of London Corporation. That's his current job. If you whiz down to the bottom, you can see that for a period of time from 2015, he was Strategic Director of Children and Young People at Rotherham Council. So he was the guy that was sent in to do the clean-up job, bury the bodies, maybe we could say, metaphorically speaking, of course, in the wake of the grooming gang scandal in Rotherham. And he's basically been given the bump up to the chop job in the city several years, 10 years down the line. Amazing how all this stuff comes together.
I'm sure, Ben, it was just a coincidence. I'm going to say thank you very much for that. That was an amazing report. Well, we got to leave it there for today. Did you have some comment?
Just to add, Mike, that we will be talking more about the Bonnie Lewis case in Extra. We will be talking more about Lucy Letby case in Extra. So
stick around if you're a UK Column member. If you're not, consider joining, because that's what keeps us going, and we do need your continued support. Thank you very much to everybody that does support us in that way. We need to leave it there. We'll be back in a few minutes for Extra if you're a member. Otherwise, don't forget the interview tomorrow at 1 p.m. and we'll be back for the news at 1 p.m. on Wednesday. See you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.